Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to Energy Talk. Energy Talk is a series of interviews that will lead us to the end of this calendar year at the Green Hydrogen Summit Oman, which is a major global event in green hydrogen. And this will highlight the momentum going on in Oman. This broadcast is sponsored by Integrated Safety International Service, branded as iSafety, our sponsor. So I am Lionel Rabin. I'm a green hydrogen expert based in Oman for a couple of decades now. I am delighted for the first episode of our program of interviews to welcome Dr. Firas Al Abduwani. Dr. Firas is the General Director of Renewable Energy and Green Hydrogen at the Ministry of Energy and Minerals of Oman. Welcome, Dr. Firas.
Thank you, Lionel. Pleasure to be here.
And we'll be going through a number of topics who are strategic topics as far as green hydrogen is concerned in the Sultanate of Oman. I'd like to start with the logical strategic level with you, and then we'll probably cascade down to project level and all the key building blocks to make the green hydrogen going on. And so starting at the strategic level, I'd like you to walk us through the vision, the energy vision in Oman, and in particular, the national green hydrogen and renewable energy vision that will basically support all the momentum of green hydrogen.
Fantastic. That's a great point to start from. If you look at Oman historically, we have been a net exporter of energy, and a large portion of our economy has been driven by energy. And globally, there's a very strong correlation between energy affordability and GDP and economic growth. So those are good starting points for us to consider. Oman is predominantly hydrocarbons, and Oman has had energy security in all of its different forms. We have been very focused as a nation to have affordability and accessibility available to the population in Oman. And now what has been added to it is, of course, the environmental element, reducing the emissions, which is not a small feat. To shift your entire energy mix from one form to another takes significant work. It's a strategic move that requires alignment of different principles, going from technologies available, education that is there, skill sets available, and also finding markets and repositioning yourself as a nation. And this is where multiple levers come in. So you have energy efficiency, which helps you along your decarbonization pathway and makes you leaner and gives you more slack when it comes to what you can do with your typical hydrocarbons. We as a nation still want to continue promoting hydrocarbons in a way that is more environmentally friendly. It remains a pillar of the economy, and we just need to make sure that it also is in compliance with our international obligations. And what is the important component now is the introduction of renewable energy and clean molecules. And that's where green hydrogen comes in. So what we want to do and what we have done is conducted multiple studies across the government and different enterprises associated. The ministry itself ran the Oman Energy Transition Policy, which later on became Oman Energy Transition Strategy instead, got formed into that. We have some of the stakeholders, such as NEMA Power, Water and Procurement Company, that also ran its own energy mix. And we compared these different studies. And there was a consensus that if we want to progress, taking the different factors, which are cost and keeping the electricity, we start with electricity, keeping the electricity at the same prices as we have them today by introducing, then there is a particular injection of renewable energy into the mix that we need to consider. And that's where our targets came in. So when we said by 2030, Oman will generate 30 to 40% of its electricity from clean sources, predominantly renewable, maybe even exclusively to start with, although we leave it to be clean electricity. By 2040, we expect 60 to 70% of the energy mix to be clean, predominantly renewable. And then by 2050, it will be 90 to 100%. So we reach net zero from an electricity perspective. That's one component, but the primary energy goes beyond electricity, which is really a carrier. And there we need to have molecules. We consume quite a bit of our hydrocarbons, the gas, in Oman for industries, and now we need to see how we can shift those, whether it is electrification or green hydrogen or low carbon hydrogen. And then we have mobility. So all of those elements that we looked into, our focus is to maintain the same fundamentals: energy security, affordability, reliability, and being a net exporter of energy as we have been, which also requires us to consider now perhaps even transmission lines that are more interconnections globally, hydrogen export in its different forms, and perhaps even if the studies, which are still ongoing, determine that we have a capability of sequestering and storing CO2, then even that becomes an option. So we look at all options. As our information evolves, our strategy sharpens, and we are agile in our movements.
Okay, that's excellent. And that provides a pretty interesting context of the decarbonization roadmap. If I may just drill a little bit in that part, what would you say is the weight of hydrogen, and in particular low carbon hydrogen and derivatives, as part of the overall decarbonization roadmap in Oman?
It's a question that is very interesting, and one that I would have answered differently every year since we started the journey. So there was a significant excitement in the market, and I think it reached its peak around 2020, 2021. And there was a lot of expectations. In hindsight, some might say that were over expectations on the role that hydrogen can play. Hydrogen today exists in this gray form, and it's an industrial gas. Why hydrogen was seen as a revolutionary or a supportive lever is because that is versatility, but it also means that it's not the only contender. When you're very versatile, and the example of the Swiss knife is used, it means that there are more specialized tools that can perhaps compete with you in certain sectors. I think when we looked at the evolution and we saw the hydrogen ladder evolve with time from market experts and adopted by different governments, it became clear that there remain some segments where hydrogen makes a lot of sense. And those are the ones that we are more pivoting towards. So we believe that there are competitors to most of the solutions that hydrogen can address. However, there are some segments that hydrogen is either the only solution or still appears to be the more likely solution. Now, we look at them from an internal perspective as a nation. So we say, okay, for our industry, this is what economically makes sense, and we'll make it available to them. And we're not a nation that typically subsidizes commodities or even new levers to bring them in. However, we're also open to what the international market wants. So what we are is that we have historically been blessed with our hydrocarbons. We also are and have been blessed with renewable energy resources. And now it's an opportunity for us to swing from one form of energy to another in a manner that helps us with our orderly transition and growing our economy. So to come back to the question with this longer background, I would say that hydrogen has a role. It's not the role that I believed in perhaps in 2020 up to 2022. I would say my view has changed. I still believe it plays a role. So you have the hard-to-abate sectors where hydrogen has no alternative. So you have refineries, it plays a role over there. Fertilizers today still plays over there. Desulfurization still plays a role over there, and there are no alternatives. But then you have industries such as the steel industry, where there are competitions, such as some of the new catalysts that did not require high temperature molten catalysts that work. But those are still TRL7. So we have some time where today steel still makes a lot of sense for us here in Oman, or let's say HBI, hot briquetted iron. And then you have potentially some bunkering fuels where hydrogen could play a role, and that we really look at the international market. So whether aviation, maritime fuels. When it comes to land-based transportation, I think hydrogen is being phased out. So originally in 2020, people expected it to cover everything. Many even back then believed that for light mobility that is not really going to happen. And now even heavy mobility is becoming more under question. So we're, to be honest, open to what the market dynamics are. If the market supports, we will keep on pushing. One of the benefits from my perspective related to green hydrogen is that it's very much linked to renewable energy. And whatever we have as ambitions for green hydrogen, if they cannot materialize, and we still believe that a large portion of them will materialize in green hydrogen format, that can be shifted to the upstream portion, which is renewable energy.
Right, absolutely. And so that's great, because that is a nice transition to the next point. You've highlighted or described the landscape. The industrial landscape, in particular for the Sultanate of Oman. We have integrated industrial clusters in Oman, such as the port of Sohar, we have port of Salalah, and now the port of Duqm, of course. And then, as you said, the country and even the region, but in particular Oman, is blessed with natural benefits or natural energy, as you rightly highlighted. So that is clear. And my next question would be, why is it the time now to make the move into green hydrogen in particular, or low carbon hydrogen in general?
Sure. So from our perspective, there was a strong demand from the international market. So Oman is rich in both solar and wind, both formats of renewable energy. And when you combine the profiles, we have, according to different analysts, among the top 10, top 5, whatever it is, we are quite competitive when it comes to the levelized cost of electricity of renewable energy. And originally it was a haphazard approach where different parties came in trying to gain access to a piece of land. And that's where the government came in, and collaboratively across the different units of the government, we formalized the approach and created Hydrogen Oman, Hydrom, and the process of where this hydrogen allocation happens. So my first response would be, why not accept all of that interest and galvanize it? We anyhow have been talking about economic diversification for a long while. This is a particular format of it that also matches our Oman Vision 2040 objectives, and when it comes to other elements other than diversification, such as quality of life, quality of the environment, improving, and then we have our obligations towards decarbonization. So it worked. And to be honest, the appetite was so large in the 2020s, even now, that there were many parties willing to come and do a lot of studies. So if we had not stepped into the hydrogen world, we would not have been able to gather as much information about our own renewable energy at the granular level that we have today. So we have a lot of data that has been garnered. There's a lot of work that has been done on what the infrastructure should look like. And to be honest, it also helps us select some of the industries we want to onshore, the ones that have a hydrogen potential, such as HBI, for example. So if you ask why now, I think because for me personally, the first is there was so much demand on it, and we knew that we could service this to provide benefit to those investors who want to come in. But we as a nation also benefit by, in the long term, and at that time we did not think long term, we thought it was a shorter term, actually be able to generate this industry. And at the fallback, if you see at the worst case scenario, you at least have gained a lot of information for your renewable energy. And again, I want to say it's not just renewable energy. We also believe that hydrogen will happen. Personally, I don't believe it will happen as what I believed back in 2021, but I still believe that a good portion of hydrogen will come out of Oman, inshallah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's for sure. And before we probably take that journey outside Oman and look at the international context, which you kind of started alluding to, I'd like, before we leave Oman in that conversation, I'd like we look into the promising project related to green hydrogen. You made reference to a number of projects that are currently under studies. It's orchestrated by Hydrogen Oman, Hydrom, which is, in my view, a very unique tool and structure as part of the green hydrogen space. We do not see that elsewhere in the world. I come from Europe. I've seen many of those, some of the elements that Oman has as part of that hydrogen space. But I've not seen all of that together in under one roof, let's say.
Yeah.
So hydro is indeed a very interesting structure, because it will enable the new green hydrogen project. Those are massive, they are very large scale. A number of them are under feasibility studies, as we know. So I'd like we maybe touch on a few of them, and I'll leave you select maybe a few of them and give us an update on where we stand with those projects. Of course, I'll start with a few names. Acme is really working hard on construction of their green hydrogen production. Highport is progressing well as well, and there are some other projects. So could you give us maybe an overview of maybe a few of them, in Duqm in particular?
Sure. I mean, I think Hydrom, and there will be, of course, one of the speakers here, and they can give you much more intimate details, but I'm happy to share some of the information. So we had 5 developers who had signed up in Duqm area. You mentioned 2 of them, Acme and Highport. Both of those, and we have to keep in mind, so although the process is one, we had different projects that came at different phases. So there were slight changes. We had the legacy projects, and then we had the ones that were awarded through the auction process itself. And some of those that were in legacy happened to be inside the free zone, whereas all latter projects happened outside the free zone. So there's some differences. From my perspective, the 2 that you mentioned should be forerunners when it comes to the ability to execute. Some of the benefits they have is that being in the free zone, they have some economic benefits that the other developers lack. Mm-hmm. They also have rich renewable resources. As it happens, a lot of the prime renewable energy resources happen to be in the CZAD area. And then the proximity they have to the port. So a lot of these elements make them, from my perspective, particularly the 2 you mentioned, Acme and Highport, at an advantage to be able to execute. So those, we saw that Acme has already mentioned FID for their first phase. They're looking at moving forward. Construction has begun. They have the initial deal they have with Yara, and that is for fertilizers and for export. Yep. So all of that is quite positive. Highport has completed their feasibilities, and now they're looking at how to convert that and sign up some off-takers, whether it is domestic or international. And then we can talk about HBI, hot briquetted iron, and to see how that plays into also not just the developers of the supply side, but the demand side and what the government is doing there. The other projects you have, I forgot geographically, you have Geo, you have also NG with the Singapore, with the South Koreans, with Samsung and POSCO, of course. Mm-hmm. And then you have AMNA project, the consortium that includes CIP. So those are the NGO, of course, if I had not mentioned them, the one led by Shell and OQ. Mm-hmm. So you have those different projects. I think Acme and Highport are ahead in their feasibility. And right now what is happening with the market correction and the market changes is a request from some of the other developers to look at what can be done from a phasing perspective, or looking at the common use infrastructure that is part of the methodology Oman is using and how that can be adapted. So I think there's very healthy discussions happening between the government and Hydrom representing it and the developers to find ways to enable them to get to the market and the timelines that are feasible.
Very good. And I think we'll have certainly one interview with Dr. Abdulaziz, typically on diving into the nuts and bolts of and the details of those projects. So,
and just not to upset our colleagues in Dhofar, we also have the projects in Salalah and Thamrit, just also to give them a mention. So you have Salalah H2, and you have the
Salalah Hydrogen, Salalah
H2, that's Marubini and OQ, among others. And then you have Actis Fortescue and another one. True. And then you also have Yamna, J-Power, and EDF in
EDF Renewable. Yeah.
So also not to forget to mention them, so that we are, giving them all a mention.
It's actually fascinating because, and that's also an excellent transition to the last part. Before we leave the the topics of the project itself, they can only exist if and only if the infrastructure support those. And infrastructure in Oman will be, as you said, predominantly, as far as green hydrogen, will be an exporting nation. And to export, then we need to produce, we need to store, we need to convert, and we need to make ready for shipping. And we've got here two perfect examples. We've got the new port, the most recently built port of Duqm, that offers interesting infrastructure to actually bring equipment in and export product, green product. But we also have Salalah with a long history of trading and shipping in and out at the crossroads between Asia and Europe. So again, without maybe preempting the discussion with Dr. Abdulaziz or his team of Hydrum, if you could just give the audience an overview of the typical component of the infrastructure that will be needed for supporting those projects.
Sure. So, I mean, the main inputs, if you look at them for hydrogen, green hydrogen specifically, is water and electricity. So you need to have the infrastructure ready for that. So whether if you talk water, the desalination, the pipelines, and then the upstream further desalination that happens. So you have potable water going up if you're doing electrolysis at the renewable energy site. And then you have further steps of desalination over there. You have the hydrogen itself that needs to come back. So that's already three infrastructures. You have, we mentioned the electricity, to also connect the upstream to the downstream. You have the water to connect the upstream to the downstream. And then you have the hydrogen. So those are the three predominant sets of infrastructure. And it depends on how you put them out. Some of them happen to be close to the port area. So their allocation of these resources and infrastructure differs. But predominantly the other ones, it's, as I mentioned, you have water going to the upstream, hydrogen coming back, and some of the electricity connecting the upstream portion of the electrolysis down to the downstream elements of whether it's ammonia or other formats that they do. So that's there. Then you have the storage that you mentioned, and that could be storage of electricity itself, or it could be storage of hydrogen. And then you have either long-term storage if it's for the domestic market, which we're also looking at. So there have been studies of the salt caverns available and how those could be repurposed, the ones around Duqm area for long-term storage, and then you have the shorter ones to facilitate. There's the common storage also for ammonia and other derivatives that has also been looked at by OTCO. So we have multiple national champions who the traditional gray formats of these molecules or electrons has been their bread and butter, and now they're all involved in their capacities to look at how they can support the green format of it.
Fantastic. And I think we have the national champion ASIAD being involved in the port terminal management and shipping as well. So.
And they're also involved in the logistics, so they help coordinate all of the fleets of the different logistics, so whether it is wind turbines being shifted or other components. Right. So they also play that role of orchestration, having one command center to make sure that there's no conflict between the different projects that hopefully will be executing at around the same time, and ensuring that there are no bottlenecks from a logistics perspective, from ports all the way to their upstream facilities.
And I always think in those terms of what are the opportunities for people who listen to us or who will come to the Green Hydrogen Summit Oman. Then you mentioned the water cycle, the water technology, HV lines, pipeline corridors, AI. I mean, all of that will become opportunities in Oman to basically fill into the supply chain of green hydrogen, I suppose.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think there are different profiles that we're seeking to attract to the Oman Green Hydrogen Summit. I'll start with the global pain point, which is off-takers. I think it's very valuable for all in the ecosystem for off-takers to visit Oman, to be able to meet the local developers awarded, and to also look at the local industry available and to find potential opportunities for them to offtake this product and help shape what specifications and particular vector of hydrogen they would like to have. Then we have developers. So although we have signed most of the projects that we have at hand, there's round 3 coming up, and they're more than welcome to also come in. You have the EPCs and then the technology providers. So all of those are welcome. In fact, when I was looking at some of the components that ACME has selected, as far as I understand, almost the majority of the components they selected happened through, if my information is correct, through the Oman Green Hydrogen Summit, or the Green Hydrogen Summit Oman. So they actually met with those technology providers over here, and then they flew out and met, and it could also been done from their base, but at least the electrolyzer suppliers, the PV suppliers, all of those were present in the first format of the Green Hydrogen Summit, and that's where they mix. So there's a great opportunity for technology providers as well. And then there's the academics. I think they add a lot of value, and they gain a lot of value from being there. And policymakers. So those are extremely important stakeholders for us to align with the shifts that happened with the focus. I mean, at some point, there was a lot of focus from Europe, for example, on energy transition. I think lately it has shifted to energy security rather than energy transition, although that is, again, swinging back, trying to accommodate some elements for the energy transition. So aligning and shaping things. And then you have the facilitators, international organizations such as H2 Global, which has platforms for connecting suppliers and buyers with each other. All of those different components, I think historically we have been successful in attracting and giving them a clear and respected presence at the podium, and we expect to repeat it again this year, inshallah.
Excellent. Excellent, which covers quite well what I was going to address later on, so perfect. There's one element, probably a couple of elements, but one element which for us engineers is not natural is the money, because we don't think in terms of money all the time. But as a businessman, as an entrepreneur, I do deal with that component every single day.
And you can see I forgot to mention the financiers, which of course are also welcome.
Absolutely. Without any finance, then we would not go too far within the green hydrogen space. So I'd like to touch a little bit on, again, from the perspective of Oman, how do we and how do you foresee making Oman attractive in terms of facilitating investors who will come? But from a financing standpoint, of course, it touches on the bankability aspect of a project. How is the regulatory environment in Oman when foreign FDIs, foreign direct investors come and put their money on the ground? What's the regulatory framework? A little bit on maybe the tax structure to incentivize people to come, and also the land allocation, which are fundamental elements sometimes when you do your due diligence, your project due diligence.
Sure. So I think what makes life easier for financiers in Oman is that Oman had been historically an energy hub, and we have had mega projects as well. So this is not something new, and our interaction with financiers, whether it is international banks or whether it is ECAs, is something that traditionally has been executed, and FDIs into Oman is not something new. What is different is the form of the project, and even then I would say that we have intermediate projects. So when we started our journey with green hydrogen, we had also green renewable energy projects taking place. And it's typically the same financiers that come in. So I don't think that it's very difficult to reach out to them. What they need is a surety that the packages make sense, that bankability is in place. And what we have seen is that many of the green hydrogen developers are the ones who have been bringing in their financiers, whether they are linked financiers from their own home nations, bringing them to link them with subsidies or benefits that their countries have from a supply perspective. Some of them bring untethered financiers who are just keen from an environmental perspective and from an ESG perspective to bring green finance. We have had efforts from Oman itself, so the Ministry of Finance, when we look at Istidama and the green bond that they're working on and linking it. So the different components that I think holistically are seamless. And the Green Hydrogen Summit Oman is a forum where many of these parties get an opportunity to meet the stakeholders, the developers, the government policymakers, the local banks, to get the comfort that what they wish to assure themselves is in place. And then you mentioned another point, sometimes to negotiate, renegotiate, reopen other elements, given evolutions of the market, that is also open. However, the particular file that you mentioned, taxation, land allocation, we can mention. We have a very clear process to it. But when it comes to taxation, Oman take which, given the evolution of the market, is being assessed, and that I will leave for Hydrom to address.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Staying with the sort of bankability, financeability aspect of those large-scale projects for addressing concerns or potential concerns from FDIs, what would you say, I mean, together with what you describe and the political stability of Oman, let's call it that way, which is that's the truth and the reality here. How would you say this compared to maybe some competing nations as exporting nations in the hydrogen space?
Sure. So I think we're all collaborative nations in the end, and yes, there is some form of competition. We all have our strengths and weaknesses. What we share is our desire to have a secure, fair and decarbonized world where our future generations can thrive. And yes, we all want to reach there in our different formats. So we have our strength, we have the strong renewable energy resources, we have the stable political landscape, we are geographically located in a position where we can service different markets, including East Asia as well as Europe. We are strong financially as a nation, having recovered quite a bit of our credit ratings and continuing to improve. And beyond that, being a trustworthy partner. So regardless of where our credit rating is, which we always aspire to push further and are working towards it, we have always honored our obligations. So we have a set of, I would say, strengths that help. And when it comes to elements that are more challenging, we also contribute. So there are some forms of carriers that are well established, ones that are less established. The government itself and Hydrom have invested in some studies to see some of those more out-of-the-box solutions tested and developed. So we create an environment that is enticing, and I believe that it makes a lot of sense. And we will not diminish the capabilities of our other collaborative nations. Some of them are net exporters, some are net importers. And we wish all of us success going forward.
Very good. Very good. Another aspect of that particular topic is the international collaboration, international partnership. I think historically, and I've been doing business in Oman for 21 years, so what I've observed straight away when I started putting the first foot in this region is the collaborative approach of Oman. In the history, this is a maritime society that dealt with a lot of nations from all over the world historically, so and that continues so right now. So I'd like to spend a few minutes on the international collaboration. We've seen very interesting announcement recently as far as the green hydrogen. We've got the liquid hydrogen corridor to Amsterdam. We've got this strategic agreement, of course, via the port of Rotterdam, which will give access to the German market for green energy, Benelux, and so on. There are a lot of historical strategic partnership between Oman and the UK, as well as in America. But what is emerging maybe more over the last 5 to 10 years is those strategic collaborative agreements and with Asia and some of the big nations in Asia. That is all, I believe, my read is Oman has the ability to leverage established relationship on LNG and other hydrocarbon product trading. I'll stop there, but given all that history and successful track record of Oman in the context of green hydrogen, and we've seen, as you said, we've seen other nations, in particular in Europe, maybe coming into a new phase where the market is balancing itself. Maybe there were like an arbor enthusiasm about green hydrogen for the right and the wrong reason. And so the market is correcting itself and balancing itself. So how do you see those strategic partnership, in particular with Europe, Korea, Japan and China?
Sure. So it's really a matchmaking between net exporters or potential net exporters and potential net importers. And then there's also the collaboration from a technology transfer perspective. So where technologies are evolving and where they can be consumed. So there is a symbiotic, beneficial relationship between both parties, and it also all really works towards energy security and decarbonization. And in that spirit, you have these collaborations, and you've mentioned most of the key parties involved. I add Antwerp, Belgium, that is also went beyond just being a potential avenue to the European market, but also proactively came and invested into OQGN as a strategic partner, showing their commitment. And it was, from my perspective, really the green hydrogen element that attracted them to come in here. And then you mentioned East Asia, Korea, Japan. And then the other nation I add that we see more present from recently is China also coming on board. So you have those nations that really see a symbiotic benefit across both ways. What we need to find is the modality where these projects can go ahead. So what are the volumes that the market can absorb? What are the vectors? And then what are the subsidies required and who should be providing them and why? So there are all of these questions. And to be honest, I believe Green Hydrogen Summit is an excellent forum where people can come and discuss those things. Nothing is set in stone. Everything evolves. We had views that were based on metrics available at hand. Those metrics have shifted, and so naturally our positions will also shift. And one of the parties that I think has had success and potentially could be a collaborative is, for example, the H2 Global platform, where it has evolved from being really German focused, although it was always created to be a neutral platform, but propelled and pushed forward by Germany. Now it's evolved to become really a neutral party that could play a role across the globe, and they've started doing point-to-point kind of relationships between a particular supplier and a particular consuming nation and establishing it, whether it's that forum or another. But all of those are collaborations that need to happen because there's very few nations that could be self-sufficient. So perhaps the US is one, China is another. India has elements of it where they have sufficient capabilities and presence of renewable energy and technology to be able to be there. I would say China typically likes to test things in their own country, iron them out, and then go out. The US during the Biden era clearly had a lot of ambitions for green, and now it has shifted more towards blue with President Trump's era. Things shift, and that's what I mean. Things shift, and accordingly the players have to accommodate the different market conditions.
Absolutely. And that's going to be interesting because the Green Hydrogen Summit Oman will be taking place at the end of the calendar year. That's still 4 or 5 months to go.
Right.
A lot of things could happen. And as you said, well, the things that Oman has done very well as well is adapting, evolving, and watching the market outside and inside. So that would be a great moment.
Maybe I can add an element on the inside. So when we started, and the announcement had a very small percentage allocated to domestic queues. And we still believe it's going to grow with time. However, the initial percentage might be higher than we originally anticipated, either because the exports would be slightly smaller, and because there's more capability of delivering hydrogen. So one of the things as a government we did is that we sat with where we believed first could be an off-taker of hydrogen, and that is the iron and steel industry. And we came up with what we call the energy transition plan. So any new steel and iron player coming into Oman has to accept the energy transition plan, which involves different elements. It includes reduction of gas consumption, hinged or not hinged to any of the other parameters. So independently, the gas profile itself needs to decrease with time as an obligation towards IGC, the integrated gas company. Then there's a decarbonization profile that they have to meet, which comes from the Oman Net Zero Center. And then on top of that, we have 2 other profiles that need to be met. One of them is related to the renewable energy, which is pretty much in sync with the Oman Net Zero Center decarbonization trajectory. However, it's also independent. So whether Oman Net Zero changes the carbon or emissions profiles or not, there's an obligation on renewable energy consumption. So actually not just getting it from the grid without any certificates, but taking it with certificates and meaningfully accounting for them. And the 4th profile is the hydrogen profile.
Okay.
So we have actually enforced a hydrogen profile. Any new party that wants to come in have a very clear 2030 target to consume a certain amount, and this took a lot of discussions. So energy in Oman typically is lower cost than other nations, and therefore a lot of players have, I would say, excess margin or some margin that could be diverted towards helping galvanize and kickstart the local hydrogen economy. And that we were successful. So we've had multiple parties. Some of them have formally signed up and committed to consuming either green hydrogen or another form of low carbon hydrogen. However, realistically, what is available or could be available is green hydrogen.
Right.
And we have multiple parties that have signed up to that.
Okay, that's excellent. And on that particular point, would you consider, of course, normally when we look at the hydrogen economy in a given country, we look at the existing consumers versus the emerging market. So maybe talking about the first part of it, we have Sohar, which is probably the higher consumer of hydrogen. It's grey hydrogen, of course, at the moment. So would you expect the conversion from grey to green to happen first, as low-hanging fruit, as we call it? Or would you expect the emerging market of exportation of green molecules to take precedence?
And I would add a third component to compete in the mix, which is new onshore downstream industries.
Right.
So you have the existing ones, as you rightly mentioned. You have the new onshore downstream projects, and then you have the export markets. From my perspective, we're looking at all three of them, and I think they all have their opportunities and challenges. When it comes to existing, I'll start with the first point you mentioned, the existing markets. If they are serving the local market, then the only incentive for them is really a regulatory and a policy adherence kind of perspective. It's more the stick kind of thing. And there also we need to look at the sunken cost they have of the assets, and some of them might not be fully depreciated. So some industries can shift and include a cleaner form of hydrogen in their process, but some of the analysis we did, some of them are not there yet, and the processes they have are not easy to include an outside form. So they have built-in SMRs or equivalent in their process, and trying to change that will cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and that's not something that is tangible. And then you have others who actually can add some forms of hydrogen, and then it's just become a matter of economics. So that is where the assessment happens, and different government entities are there reviewing what can be done. In the end, we want them to be competitive to the global market. So just as Europe created CBAM to protect its market, the carbon border adjustment mechanism, because they know that they'll have inflated prices and they need to protect themselves from people who do not adhere to that. So unless we have a similar mechanism and unless the market can accept those additional costs, it doesn't make sense. When we come to onshore new industries, the point that I added to the table, there I think we have ability to nudge, because they can, from the beginning, invest in technologies from day one are hydrogen ready. And that we had success with the HBI market. So those DRIs, the direct reduced iron projects, have accepted taking hydrogen from day one at small quantities, but something that increases with time. So I think there we've had success. And now we're looking what are the other industries we can bring that from day one can take it. And then the third one, which is export, which again we believe from day one should be successful, and that we still believe would be the majority of the project, but that's an externality, and that's where the international collaboration is important, and we need to see whether this is workable and at what quantities and what time frames.
Yeah, so that definitely adds a very interesting perspective of Oman becoming green derivatives or green materials hub, exporting hub.
And intermediate products.
Yeah, which is an interesting shift from where it started when the country developed its first roadmap back in the days in 2019. So that's another interesting topic for people coming to Green Hydrogen Summit Oman to debate and get into. I'd like to just progress with one building block or element or component of the success of green hydrogen we have not touched too much on, which is the human resources. You made reference to it with research and training and so on. But I'd like we drill a little bit more, because from my perspective, and I actually provide a training package through the so-called Oman Institute of Energy now, formerly in Stock. And I find it fascinating that the Omani population, in particular the young Omani population, graduates, undergraduates, are very open to either get skilled about green hydrogen or reskilled or upskilled. So I like that openness and they are ready, I think. But that's one of the gaps. Let's face it, that's probably one of the gaps that we need to bridge in this country to be ready for when the big wave of investment is going to come on stream. Sure. And that's going to be, we're just around the corner, because you mentioned 2030 for the first very large project to be on stream. So could you give us an overview of how you see the knowledge transfer and training?
Absolutely, and it's a topic we take seriously. So one of the first studies that we conducted after we introduced the green hydrogen strategy was looking at market labor intelligence. And there we had, as a partner, Opal, which typically looked at the oil and gas sectors, and it's really now transformed into energy, just as Instog has shifted to becoming the Oman Institute for Energy. So everyone is shifting away from being oil and gas specific to energy-wide. Right. So Opal, in their new form, conducted on the behalf of the government and labor market intelligence, where they looked at the requirements, the different scenarios of how the market could evolve and what are the skills required to match that. And that information was taken on board and then passed to parties such as Oman Institute for Energy to say, these are what we believe we require. Prepare yourself to be able to skill, upskill, or reskill. There have been discussions also with the universities over here. So during the journey, we've had multiple new bachelor's and master's courses that have been introduced. And all of this is in preparation. And what I would like to say is that, yes, green hydrogen is important. What is valuable about it is made of traditional components that are just being merged. So it has a renewable energy component, it has process engineering, and it also has the downstream element, chemical engineering, and all of those have their own value. They can be branded together as a hydrogen project or a hydrogen skill set, but fundamentally it has core skills that cross other sectors and makes you as a candidate applicable to beyond the green hydrogen economy, which is in itself creates versatility and accommodating our shift towards a green economy.
Do you also see a role for the private sector to encourage transfer of knowledge, technology, know-how, and so on?
Absolutely. Well. So it's something that we track. All of the developers that are working in Oman have commitments to invest in R&D and knowledge transfer. Some of those are deferred to happen once COD happens, when cash flows come in, which is makes sense. But there are also components that they have already taken from day one. So contracting local consultants, working with local academia, having cross-posting positions where some of their expert staff are based here in Oman, and then you have some of the Omani staff being transferred over. So you have this mobility of staff that also enriches the knowledge landscape, and it creates opportunities for knowledge transfer. It does not sometimes have to be orchestrated. Just this human transfer itself creates bubbles of interaction where knowledge transfers naturally. But on top of that, you do have knowledge transfer sessions. For example, we at the ministry from time to time call in some of those, whether they're seconded people from abroad into Oman or local Omanis who have experienced the international world in our different segments. We bring them to give us workshops at least within our renewable energy and hydrogen department. We do that to enrich us as policymakers with their viewpoints and learnings. And I think that happens across Oman in different forms.
Very good. And I think it's important for the people who will join us at the Green Hydrogen Summit Oman to keep that in mind, that in particular, there is a great pool of talent in Oman ready to absorb what those technology partners and operators and investors can bring. We're reaching toward the end of our very interesting dialogue, Dr. Firas. So I'd like to touch on a few closing points with you that maybe the people who have been very good at listening to us will take away. So maybe if you had a few messages, but also what you expect the outcome of Green Hydrogen Summit Oman to be.
Sure. So one of the things we didn't touch that I also would like to add is that Oman is also looking at electricity market liberalization, which is something that adds value because it creates opportunities. Again, a large portion of what green hydrogen is linked to renewable energy. And that is something that I mentioned, the different targets we have for 2030, 2040, 2050. And we've created new mechanisms such as the direct sales and wheeling mechanisms that have already been announced as policies, and the regulations are out and about. So with that, we are able to not only accommodate new renewable energy developers to execute that, but it creates an avenue for green hydrogen developers to also diversify their revenue streams and be a player in the direct sales market, and perhaps that also evolves. So what I would say is that there are many components, and Oman is a nation that is continuously moving forward and evolving and accommodating while sticking to the fundamentals. So if your fundamentals match ours, which is a secure, fair, and green life for humanity, something that we all aspire to, then these are fundamentals we work. We are quite cognizant of the market shifts, and we're very reasonable when it comes to accommodating and looking at it. In fact, I would say one of our themes for Green Hydrogen Summit is having a reflection point and looking at how we can absorb the different and diverse viewpoints. So whether you have different, I would not say you have optimists and pessimists. I would say we're all realists, but with different flavors of realism.
Yeah.
And all of these shades of realism are welcome. And in fact, we encourage them, and those discussions across all of the stakeholder map is very valuable. Oman is poised to be a clear player when it comes to renewable energy and its derivatives, hydrogen, and further downstream. And if you're interested in this space, then Oman is the place, and Green Hydrogen Summit is a summit for you to attend, to be able to have an influence on how we evolve. So you're more than welcome to join us in this summit, to enter the dialogue with us, and to constructively work with each other to find solutions to meet the fundamental objectives I mentioned.
I think this will be the closing point. Dr. Firas, thank you very much. And I hope this dialogue help people also grasp a little bit what is at stake in Oman, but what will be also the area of dialogues when we all meet in between the 1st and the 3rd of December of this year. Inshallah. Thank you so much for your participation to this interview.
Thank you, Lionel. It was a pleasure.
You're welcome. And maybe just a few words for the audience. So this was Dr. Firas Al Abduwani, Director of Renewable Energy and Hydrogen at the Ministry of Energy and Minerals of Oman. This series of interview will carry on. We'll have some other deciders and stakeholders, and probably even maybe international players. And so keep watching it. It's a series of episodes. I want to thank the sponsor as well, iSafety, who is sponsoring this series of dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you.